Hello everyone and welcome to a new video of your Polyglot Academy. Today we're going to talk about time expressions, so let's start. Now the first time expression we're going to talk about is jetzt, which means now. Right down below you can see an example. Jetzt habe ich leider keine Zeit, ich rufe dich später an, which means unfortunately I don't have time now, I'll call you later. And here you can see how we're using jetzt right at the beginning of the sentence in order to indicate the time we're talking about. He's saying that he's not having time exactly right now, and because of that, we're saying jetzt. Another thing which you might have noticed, and which is also pretty important for the German grammar, is the position of habe ich in this case. Now, in a normal sentence, we would simply say ich habe leider keine Zeit, which means I do not have time. In this case, however, we have a time expression which is preceding the subject and the verb. Because of that, the verb and the subject are going to invert their positions. So we're not going to start the sentence anymore with the subject and then with the verb, but we're inverting them so that we're going to have jetzt habe ich and not jetzt ich habe, which would be false. The second time expression is nun, which also means now, but it's less used in comparison to jetzt. Hier can see an example. Nun, da wir alle hier sind, können wir mit dem Meeting starten, which means now that we're all here, let's start the meeting. And right at the beginning of the sentence, you can see nun, which means now. Now, another thing to notice would be the fact that we're using a dative in the second part of the sentence. While saying können wir, and while using the preposition mit, remember we already talked about prepositions, we know that mit is a dative preposition, so der Meeting is going to be dem Meeting. This is also very important to notice. And if you're able to recognize something like that, it means that you understood the topic, so it's very good. The third time expression is später, which means later. And we can see example. Wir können gerne später reden, jetzt kann ich nicht. And you can see how we're using later, which means we're welcome to talk later. I can't right now. In this case, später simply means later. Following on, I'm going to talk about gerade, which means right now, and here you can see an example. Ich mache meine Hausaufgaben gerade, which means I'm doing my homework right now. And you can see how the meaning of gerade is simply right now. Now, an interesting thing about gerade is the fact that it can be used in German to form what in English is called the present continuous. So we can use gerade in order to form verbs like I'm doing, I'm making, I'm cooking, and so on. Continuing on, the next time expression is going to be heute, which means today. And the example is simply heute ist mein Geburtstag, which means today is my birthday. The next example is going to be with morgen, which means tomorrow. You can see morgen habe ich einen Termin mit meinem Arzt. And you can see how morgen simply means tomorrow. And in the second part of the sentence, you can see how we're using the dative after the preposition mit, because mit is a dative preposition. So just to refresh that in your mind. Gestern, which means yesterday, and the example is simply gestern hatte ich ein Fußballspiel und wir haben gewonnen, which means yesterday I had a soccer game and we won. And in this case, it's also important to remember what I mentioned at the beginning of today's lesson. If you're having a time expression or simply a preposition or something like that before the subject and the verb, then you know that the position of the subject and the verb is going to invert. So it is very important to remember that the verb always assumes the second position in a sentence. So if you wouldn't have the time expression gestern, then you would simply say ich hatte ein Fußballspiel. But because of the fact that you have gestern, then you are going to say gestern hatte ich ein Fußballspiel. And you're kind of inverting the order of ich and hatte. But you can see that the verb still remains in the second position. So it's very important to remember. And finally, the last time expression is going to be dann or danach, which means then or afterwards, depending on the context. And the example is simply ich esse, dann gehe ich einkaufen, which means I eat, then I go shopping. And you can see how the meaning perfectly translates to what we said. Now, in order to refresh everything we did today, here you can see a table with some examples and with the respective translation. And if you understood everything, please do the exercises. After memorizing these 8 time expressions we talked about, try to write some sentences by combining these time expressions with the time prepositions we talked about in lesson 25. So that by combining them, you're going to learn both of them and you're going to know how to use both of them in the same context. If you have any question, don't hesitate to leave a comment. And as always, thanks for your attention. Have a nice day.